The war in Iraq became increasingly hostile since its origins in April of 2003. Iraq became the fighting grounds between the United States and the remaining resistance from the Ba'athist government of Saddam Hussein after he fell on December 30th, 2006. The objective? To find out if the Ba'athist government was storing weapons of mass destruction.
We had the opportunity to meet up with Army Major Dale Hunt to talk about his deployment.
The whole process of deployment was massive. We were notified 1 year ahead of time that we were going to be deployed. They didn't tell us where, but they told us, you're getting deployed. And they told us Iraq, but they didn't say where.
Major Hunt was the head of communications in Task Force 321, a battalion that would be deployed in Iraq.
Our orders kicked in. They took all of us, put us on active duty, and sent us to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. And they put us in barracks there, and we spent 2 months at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. So we lived all together, we worked all together, and we trained all together on what our mission was going to be.
The 321st Engineers departed Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and headed for Ramadi, Iraq. Major Hunt recounts the first time he stepped into Camp Ramadi.
The second I get out of the vehicle, you hear this, incoming, incoming. It was like, so the guys that had been there for a long time were like, yeah, whatever. But we were like, oh, shit. So we would run and get, and they had these U-shaped concrete bunkers. So all of us that had just gotten off ran to these U-shaped, got into these bunkers, and we waited. And you could hear these thumps around the fob where the incoming had hit. And then it was all clear, and then you get out, and then all of a sudden the outgoing goes. Because they do reverse trajectory on the incoming, and they fire back with the outgoing.
Okay.
And so there's a row of Paladin tanks that are tanks that have howitzers on them, and these howitzers just start going.
The 321st Engineers were the lead element of Task Force Pathfinder.
This is a route clearance group of vehicles, and we're going out. Our mission is to go from point A to point B and clear the road of all of the IEDs that the bad guy buried, so that the infantry can follow us and kick in doors and do what they do behind us, right? So, and make it safe for them to travel down the road. So we're the biggest target. We're the guys that the bad guys hate because they know we're finding all their bombs, right? So they shoot at us all the time, and they try to kill us all the time. And we lost 7 soldiers and had 135 Purple Hearts. So as an officer, you don't really fraternize with the enlisted guys for the most part. But when you're in a combat zone, you kind of do. They become your friends, right? And you try to keep a distance from them because you know at any time, if I told you to go out and go on a mission and you came back dead, if you were my good buddy, it would pretty much destroy me, right? So you had to keep a wall up between me, the officer, and the enlisted guys. As close as you get, you still keep the wall up because you got to keep it you got to keep them at a distance, at an arm's length.
Major Hunt was able to take an IED pressure plate from Iraq.
This particular pressure plate was in sequence with 2. My father has the other one. They were about this far apart, buried under the ground in the road, and they were designed for a Bradley vehicle because it was tied to a switch, and the switch had still has two 9-volt batteries, and the 9-volt batteries were tied to it was obviously cut by the EOD guy, explosive ordnance disposal guy, but we found it via metal detection, our metal detection vehicle, which was called a Husky. And the Husky had these 2 metal detectors that would come down like this on hydraulics. They'd come out, and he'd drive down the road, and he would, just risk his life driving down the road because if he hits one, it's gonna. But as soon as he detects metal, there's these dye squirters on those little metal detectors, and they'd squirt red dye where he thinks he sees a hit of metal. So he found these, and there was red dye in the road, and the Buffalo came up. And the Buffalo is a bigger vehicle, which I happen to be in, that has a robotic arm that comes out, and we called it interrogates the potential IED. So we drove up to the site where these were, under the ground, under the dirt in the road, and I was standing up watching, and as the arm comes out and it starts to dig, where this guy's using little thumb like you guys play your games. And he's digging with this, and the EOD tech goes, Major Hunt, you need to sit down, because if that goes off, you're gonna get a huge concussion. Because there was two, you could see him, he pulls it up with this robotic arm, and you could see, didn't see the pressure plates yet, but we saw two big 105 howitzer rounds buried in the ground. And these were tied by a det cord to these pressure plates. So if you drove over these pressure plates, the 105 howitzer rounds were over here, and they would blow up directly under your vehicle and kill anything and everybody in the vehicle. Because 105 howitzer rounds are huge; they're really big. So what he did was he pulled and lifted up the howitzer rounds, and then he kind of shook them, and they broke off and fell down. So they were inert at that point; they wouldn't blow up.
The reasoning for fighting in the Iraq War was controversial, and many citizens suspected the government was lying.
The government said we never found weapons of mass destruction. The government lied. We found them. I'm here to tell you today that we found WMDs, and it wasn't on the scale that the media was hoping it would be, and it wasn't something that the government wanted to tell, because my assumption is if the bad guys knew what they had, they would have used them. These caches of chemicals, the bad guys never really got around because they were leaking. They couldn't really interact with them, because a leaking chemical weapon will certainly harm you, right? So these particular weapons that we had found, some were leaking. I said, hey, so what are we supposed to tell people? And he's like, we're not supposed to tell them anything. I never found anything. So they convinced him, and they convinced all of us not to say anything. That's one of the biggest lies, was weapons of mass destruction were never found in Iraq. That's just bullshit. We totally found them. It just wasn't on the scale that the media wanted it to be.
The Anbar Awakening was a movement that started in Ramadi and was a key part in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
The Anbar Awakening was huge in Iraq, and it actually spread through Iraq, and it helped to reduce the violence in Iraq. And it started in Ramadi when I was there. The bad guys would go to a school, and they would fire mortars at us. Well, we would fire right back and blow up the whole school, right? And kill any innocent people and what have you. So it certainly was a bad tactic. So this colonel said, hey, look, we're going to build combat outposts all throughout Ramadi. We're going to strategically locate them so that we can see all the different avenues of approach in all the hot areas, and we'll control those areas through these combat outposts. Sandbags were used from all of us, filling them all at those combat outposts, right, to set them up. And they brought Navy Seabees to Ramadi to build these these little outpost buildings. And they would take these outpost buildings out to the combat outposts, set them down, and fortify them with sandbags, put troops around them, and off we'd go to the next one. So there's two groups involved here: the Navy SEALs and the combat engineers. And the combat engineers were the folks that led the group of vehicles that carried all the sandbags and all these huts out to the location. So we would have to clear the route for all these guys to come down, but the Navy SEALs were there as snipers, etc. So you've heard of American Sniper? So he was there when I was there. We worked together. I didn't know him, but we worked together indirectly. So he would, as we would come up, we were called dagger teams. The dagger team would clear the route. The Navy SEALs would kill any of the bad guys that were shooting at us as we cleared the route, because there was lots of them. They would keep the bad guys' heads down as we would clear the route and then move out. And they're still, shooting the bad guys as the flatbed trailers would come in and set up the combat outpost and build the sandbags up. And we did that all throughout the city. So moving throughout the city, we set up combat outposts, but simultaneously the army worked with the local sheiks to come up with this understanding that we are going to train a local police force. And we are going to hire them, pay them, trained them. We gave them these blue and white Ford trucks. We paid them. We hired them. You know, we recruited them. We trained them on Camp Ramadi, how to be police, how to kill the bad guys. And we coordinated with the local sheiks to hire their, you know, who they thought were the local honest guys. And the sheiks, because Al-Qaeda in Iraq was killing their kids, killing the sheiks, killing the local government, they just got sick of it. And they said, you know what? We're gonna side with the American army, and we're gonna take the Brotherhood from Ramadi, the Brotherhood of Iraq, and we're going to create something called the Anbar Awakening, and we're gonna say no more, we're done with it. So the army's gonna build combat outposts, they're gonna keep us safe, and we are going to retake our city. And that was the Anbar Awakening. It was a huge, huge success for the US Army. It was very good tactical maneuvering. It's historically something that I think if we ever do this again, they'll look at and they'll model, because it worked really well for us. Mm-hmm. And the violence level for the first 6 months that I was there was enormous. But after we implemented this thing with the sheiks, Anbar Awakening, the violence level dropped significantly.
Major Hunt's service affected not only himself, but also his family. We asked his son Seth about some of the events from his father's service.
Mom said, hey, you should read this. And I read it, and it just talked about he was talking about his family and us, and I remember just having one tear hit the page, and that was kind of just something I remember from reading about from him. One of the first days when I was gonna go back to school after he'd gotten back, I was crying in the car because I didn't want to go to school because I wanted to stay with my dad because he was back, and so I didn't go to school that day, and I stayed home with him. So.
Through the Anbar Awakening, U.S. forces were able to restore peace to Ramadi. Task Force 321 found and cleared over 2,000 IEDs. After a year, Major Hunt returned to his family. 4,425 brave men and women lost their lives in Iraq. 32,223 others were wounded. The fear of an IED going off and taking away someone's life still exists in the minds of some soldiers who came home. No civilian can comprehend how damaging war can be. Always remember, freedom comes at a price.
All I know is that sometimes you have to be wary of a miracle too good to be true. All I know is that sometimes the truth is contrary. Everything in life you thought you knew. All I know is that sometimes you have to be wary, 'cause sometimes the target is you. All I know is that memory can be too much to carry. Striking out like a bomb from a balloon. All I know is that sometimes the truth is contrary.
Hey, 6 Officer Special Moore speaking. How may I help you, man?
The system is down.
The system is down!
System is down? Oh.
The system is down!
Dum 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 dum. Do